Catherine Howard, the fifth wife of Henry VIII. She was held prisoner there prior to her execution. Others have included William Penn, founder of Pennsylvania as we know it today. More recently, in 1941, Rudolf Hess, deputy to Adolf Hitler. Today, the Queen's House is actually the residence of the Constable of the Tower. Now, the stone building behind me is the Beecham Tower. In there, you'll find the prisoners' exhibition. But upstairs on the walls, you'll also find lots of medieval graffiti that was carved on the walls by the prisoners. Some of it actually dates back over 450 years. Now, some of it is actually very beautiful. Others are very basic. And it depended on how much money the prisoner had. If he had a lot of money, he actually employed the services of a stonemason to come and do his graffiti for him. Wonderful. Keeps people employed. Lie left at the Chapel Royal of St Peter ad Vincula. We're going to be entering there shortly, and that was where you'll see where those unfortunate souls who were executed here and outside on Tower Hill were finally laid to rest. Now behind you, ladies and gentlemen, that very long building, that is the Waterloo Block. And it was built in 1845 as a barracks to house troops from the Tower garrison. One time there's actually 1,000 troops garrisoned here under the Duke of Wellington. But today on the ground floor you will find the crown jewels and the royal regalia. Now to see those, ladies and gentlemen, you go through the doorway in the middle of the building. Now there is a queue, but do not be frightened of that queue, ladies and gentlemen. It moves constantly and it moves very, very quickly. So please do stick with it. If you leave today and you haven't seen the crown jewels, you might as well just put your money in the rubbish. This is rubbish. I'm on a joke. Right, how many people are interested in military history? Memorial, that marks the site of the private scaffold. And this is where execution took place very much as the word suggests, in private. Now the first person to be beheaded here was Queen Anne Boleyn. She was held here for the last 18 days of her life in 1536. Tried, condemned to death on charges of adultery, incest, witchcraft, various other crimes. One of which was laughing at the king's clothes. What's that all about? Now she was frightened of the block and axe, so she requested to be executed in the French manner, not using a guillotine, using a very long double-edged sword. The executioner was brought all the way from France for this very occasion. And the fact that he was here a week before her trial even started may even tell you something. 5 years later, it was the turn of a lady called Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury, an elderly aunt of King Henry VIII, accused of no crime, given no trial. Her problem was she had a son who was a cardinal, Reginald Pole, and he was travelling all over Europe preaching against King Henry VIII because Henry had broken away from the Catholic Church. And the only way that Henry could wreak his revenge on the cardinal was to execute the cardinal's mother. Following year in 1542, the axe fell twice on the same day. The victims were Queen Catherine Howard and her lady-in-waiting, Jane Boleyn, the Viscountess of Rochford. Now, Catherine's crime was to associate herself with many other men. You get my meaning? Treason against the king. The lady-in-waiting, because she knew about these affairs that had kept them secret from King Henry VIII, she suffered the exact same fate. 12 years were then to pass. It was 1554. The axe fell again on the pretty young neck of Lady Jane Grey, the uncrowned Queen of England of only 9 days, and she was actually a pawn caught up in a struggle for power. She was imprisoned at number 5 Tower Green, the middle blue door on the west wall. And from the room upstairs where she was held prisoner, she could have looked out to the window to see her husband, Lord Guildford Dudley, being taken from the Beecham Tower, marched off to Tower Hill for public execution. Shortly afterwards, she would see his headless body be brought back to the tower for burial in the chapel. Now, if that wasn't traumatic enough for a young 16-year-old lady, in that very same window she could see and hear the building of the scaffold for her own execution later that same day. The last person to be beheaded here in 1601 was a man called Robert Devereux, 2nd Earl of Essex, and actually a great favourite of Queen Elizabeth I. But in her later years, he plotted against her. So he was tried and found guilty of treason, and he was sentenced to death. But actually he was a very popular man. And they were fearful to execute him on the hill in case his supporters would come and whisk him away. That was why he was executed inside the Tower ground. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all the people who were executed here and outside on the hill were taken to the chapel to be buried. So we're going to go into the chapel where we will conclude.